that time again for the assault on your dice we call Lower Dorks, a Star Trek Adventures live play. Tonight, on our tabletop is...
Whoa. That's not at all what we're doing today.
What?
Not at all.
No? But I mixed characters.
And that's not characters. You were supposed to mix drinks. It was drinks, Aaron.
I can do both.
No, you can't. Let's talk about what we're actually supposed to be talking about tonight. And that is, well, you're kind of halfway there, Aaron. It was the tabletop role-playing game Star Trek Adventures, but more specifically, the Lower Decks stuff that is releasing this summer on Star Trek Adventures. But you know what? In order to do that, we need to introduce our two guests. Let's go to Al first. So, Al Spader, you are a freelance writer and you work on Star Trek Adventures. Give us the rundown on everything you've done.
Yeah. How's it going? Al Spader. I'm a freelance writer for Star Trek Adventures. I'm also a writer for the Modiphius World Builders program for the role-playing game Sentience. And yeah, I've been working with Jim and the other writers for a couple of years now. Have 4 books out at this time that I've worked with. So excited to be here.
Excellent. And what beverage are you enjoying this evening? It's kind of a free-for-all tonight, so...
So this evening I am drinking a Downey cider. I'm from Maine, and this is a local brewery in Maine, and it is a strawberry cider. It's delicious.
That sounds really great. I'm actually kind of jealous. I'm kind of a cider person myself.
Only boring people are not cider people.
Hey, we'll talk about that later. Let's move on to Jim. Jim Johnson, you're, I believe you're known as the project manager or a project manager on Star Trek Adventures. You have a ton of credits all over the place. Why don't you give us the rundown on who exactly you are and what you've done on Star Trek Adventures?
Yeah, sure thing. First of all, thanks for having us on the show. Really appreciate it. My name is Jim Johnson. I'm the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures RPG, published by Modiphius Entertainment. I am the primary point of contact for Star Trek Adventures. So if you need anything Star Trek Adventures related from Modiphius, I'm the one to go to because I will either point you in the right direction or provide the answers. So I've been working with Modiphius for just over 7 years now, pretty much exclusively on Star Trek. Although earlier on, I had enough bandwidth to dabble with the Fallout the Fallout 2D20 RPG. I helped out working on the adaptation of the Fallout Wasteland Warfare to RPG, and then provided just a couple little bits and pieces for the actual 2D20 RPG itself. But otherwise, been all Star Trek all the time. I think I've touched 99% of the Star Trek Adventures products that Modiphius has released to date, and they put me in charge of it as the project manager at the end of, actually, I guess it was August of 2019, like right before the pandemic, and have been steering the ship since then. And been working with Al and a bunch of other writers and developers and editors and proofreaders and artists and so on and so forth for a long time now. And we got a nice little machine cranking along here, so super excited to be here tonight to be talking with you about Lower Decks.
Excellent. And of course,
Excellent.
The real question here. So, Star Trek Adventures, labor of love or soulless cash grab? Tell me your truth.
I'm a lifelong fan of Star Trek from the early 70s, and so this is absolutely a labor of love for me. I mean, I'm a project manager, obviously, so it's a part-time gig. It's a freelance gig for me, but it's 100% in my brain. It's a labor of love. I'm doing this partly because I'm a lifelong gamer too, right? And I know exactly what kind of Star Trek stuff I want at my game table and on my shelf, and I just lucked into a position where I can actually make it. Not just for me, but for all the other Star Trek gamers out there too. So, absolutely, in my mind, it's a labor of love. Al might have a different opinion, but that's where I stand anyway.
Come on, Al, don't let me down.
No, I would say that this is definitely a labor of love. I think just being a part of a community of writers on such a special IP is any money that you make during this job is, it's just kind of like in the background. I think scratching the creative itch and bouncing ideas off of other writers and things like that is, it's something. It does something to my brain that just, I love, and well, it's nice to get paid to write stuff, but just having your fingers in on an IP that is so cool and a game that is just one of the best on the market is spectacular.
That's disappointing. Yeah. Nobody ever says soulless cash grab.
I feel like this could have been a
Where
trick
are my
question.
dispassioned capitalists? Come on, man. I know you exist.
Not on this episode.
Well, I doubt they're really getting involved in Star Trek at this level.
I will say that I've been freelancing for the tabletop RPG industry on and off for 20 odd years now, and like earlier in my career, I was a young and hungry writer, just like so many more out there, and I was trying to grab work anywhere I could, and I will freely admit that a lot of my earlier work was absolutely soulless cash grab, because I had the time and the ability to learn a property fairly quickly. Like I'd read the core book and some of the supplements and like get up to speed within a couple of weeks, and then I'd be ready to write a supplement or write some material for it. And there was no passion in it, right? It was just work. It was just trying to do anything I could to fill out my CV and get some credits and get some momentum going. And I hated it, like honestly, because it just took so much time to learn something new, and then to hit the streets and find work. And I was like, you know what? That's why I really feel like I've been dabbling in the RPG industry for a long time now, until I fell in with Modiphius. And it's like I would have liked to have done more, but in order to do more, you've got to learn like every single system and every single property, and I just didn't want to do that anymore. I just didn't want to keep fighting the media tie-in kind of circus. So I have done the soulless cash grab. I will be the first to admit that.
I think everybody has done the soulless cash grab. We all got rent to pay.
Yeah.
You're definitely right. Before we get too far off track, though, Jim, why don't you tell us about what you're drinking tonight?
I'm sure it'll be disappointing to some of you and some of your audience, but I have myself a bottle of nice cold water. That's what my drinking.
Oh.
I've been drinking a lot lately. So.
No, that's what you got to do, right? Like sometimes.
I will be honest. I did check. I had a bottle of cherry lambic in my fridge, but I uncorked it and it had turned. So it's been in my fridge for so long. It was in my fridge for so long that I promptly forgot about it, and I was saving it for a special occasion, and I thought that might be tonight, and unfortunately it's not where it needs to be. So I'm sticking with my water tonight.
To be fair enough. I also have a bottle of water, but I also have a giant glass of booze. So
what is your booze, Aaron?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Much like my usual RPG characters, it's a mix of things that shouldn't be put together. There's a little bit of whiskey, there's a little bit of vodka, there's some Pink Whitney, there is some powdered drink mix in there to cover up that horrible blend. I added some water because it was a little too strong. Oh, yeah.
I don't know about this.
Oh, boy.
That just can't be
There's
right.
also some bitters in there because, I put bitters in everything.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, unlike you, I'm drinking something more simplistic. It is one of my go-tos. It's Old Smoky, mango habanero flavor whiskey. One of my great go-tos. I actually finished off my bottle. Yeah, I need to get a new one because it's actually quite tasty.
Old Smoky makes a rainbow of flavors. You should
it does.
Spread your wings.
It's really good.
Fly through the skies.
Try something else. Yeah.
Updrafts of Old Smoky.
Indeed. But let's talk about why we're here. So this is a Lower Decks show, and Aaron and I do have some tabletop RPG experience, but you know what? A lot of other people listening to this show might not. So Jim and Al, between you guys, can you tell us more about what Star Trek Adventures is and why the average Lower Decks fan might care about the content coming out this summer?
Yeah, sure. I'll start, Al, and then why don't you just provide some color commentary once I get through my initial spiel. So tabletop RPGers. So Star Trek, of course, is a property that's been around for 56 years, and it has had some sort of tabletop RPG presence since I think since the early 80s. With FASA was one of the first license holders. They were around for a number of years, and then the license went over to Last Unicorn Games for a little while, and then Decipher for a little while, and then after Decipher lost the license in the early 2000s, like the aughts. It must have been 2003, 2004, something like that. The RPG license kind of just sat around. No one picked it up, as far as I can recall. No one did anything with it until Modiphius picked it up in 2016 and developed the latest version of the Star Trek RPG, which is called Star Trek Adventures. We've been going 7 years strong now. There are 25 or 26 print products, I think, and a whole slew of digital products. It's a narrative-focused game, 2D20. So if you've been playing other RPGs out there, I would say this one's much different than the most popular RPG in the world, and it's similar in respects to some more modern RPGs, like more narrative-focused ones. That's the high-level overview. Al, you want to provide some other details?
Yeah, so, and for those of you that don't know what a role-playing game is, essentially you develop characters, and characters play through different scenarios that are delivered by what we call the Game Master in Star Trek Adventures. And there are numbers on your sheet of paper that represent your character. There are also words on your sheet of paper that represent your character. Both the numbers and the words carry heavy meaning in the game of Star Trek Adventures. In fact, it's one of, like Jim was saying, one of these more modern game systems where the words actually matter, and there are mechanics around like what your values are as a person and things like that. So it's a really, really cool and flexible system that allows you to be as narrative as you want to be, or as what we like to say, crunchy as you want to be. So if you're somebody that just likes to take on the role of a Klingon and go and hunt down packs of Targs, you can do that very easily in the game. But if you're also someone that likes to tell a character story, a character arc, the game also does that very well as well.
The game, now that it's 7 years old, we've been able to expand it quite a bit since the initial core book came out in 2017. So at this point, you can play pretty much any era, any series, any kind of character that you've seen in Star Trek. You can do it in the game. So you don't have to just limit yourself to Starfleet characters on a Starfleet ship. You can do literally anything you want within the Star Trek universe. We've got rules and/or advice or material that can help you do pretty much anything you want. So it's all Star Trek all the time. Anything that you can think of will fit in here, including Lower Decks, which is why we're here talking about this tonight.
So what about, just to pop in a question here. So let's say, we've got, Joe, Lower Decks fan. He's, relatively new to the franchise. He's really into Lower Decks, but has never played a tabletop RPG before. Is he going to have an easy time getting into Star Trek Adventures? You mentioned that it's both crunchy and also not so crunchy. And I assume crunchy means like, rules heavy or not so much. What's the new tabletop RPG fan experience? Someone who's really into Lower Decks, but has never played a tabletop game before.
Yeah, great question. I'd say if you're curious about the game and you've got a group of friends locally, or you got a group of friends online, or you want to find a group online or locally, whatever. Online play is blown up in the last probably 5-6 years or so. I'd say with Discord and so many other platforms that are out there, it's relatively easy to get into a game online. Just as it is to get together with your friends at a table or something.
I wouldn't be surprised if statistically there are more people playing on a desktop than on a tabletop these days.
Yeah, that'd be a fascinating statistic to get more information on for sure. But yeah, if you grab yourself a free copy of the Quick Start, we've got two versions. We got a Starfleet version of the Quick Start and a Klingon version of the Quick Start. I'd say both Quick Starts have a summary of the rules, all the essential stuff that you need to get started, plus an introductory adventure. One is obviously Klingon focused, the other one's Starfleet focused, but you can get those for freezies. You don't need to buy anything to get into the game, just to try it out. I'd say grab one of those, see what you think of it. If you like it, grab the core rulebook. Again, we have two versions of the core rulebook. We have a Starfleet version and a Klingon version. So just depending on what you're curious about, wanting to play. If you want to play, straight up Starfleet, do that. Or you can play Klingon Warriors, or you can do something in between, whatever. And then, specifically if you're looking for Lower Decks, the Lower Decks campaign guide is just about to come out. It's on pre-order right now. It'll be out at Gen Con in early August, and then it'll be available for general purchase, all around the world at your local game store or online at Modiphius' websites, etc. But you don't really need a lot of other supplements. I think just the core book, or even just the Quick Start, and then the Lower Decks book, you're good to go for years and years and years of gaming. We try to make it fairly easy to get into the game, and then we try to provide you a minimum number of supplements that you're either expected to purchase other than the core book. I mean, you're good to go at that point.
I gotta say, I had not looked at Star Trek Adventures since the initial launch, until we started preparing for this podcast, and I was blown away by the prodigious amount of content, both paid content and free content, available for Star Trek Adventures. Like, I think about like how much companies like Paizo and D&D and Wizards that have these huge market shares and how much content they put out. And I was blown away by how much Modiphius puts out. And it's not low-quality content at all. It's got solid artwork. It's got good design work. It takes a lot of effort to produce that. And the fluff is really solid. And the crunch seems like it's very well thought out. I was blown away just by the whole range of content.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, there's a lot out there for sure. Can you guys think of an example of like the most obscure, because of the range of content, is there like an obscure character type you can play, or what's like, considering all the stuff out there, what's like the neatest kind of combination of things that could come out of that?
Oh boy.
Well,
there's a lot out there.
With the Lower Decks campaign guide that's dropping, we introduced 8 new character species, and a lot of them are very unique Lower Decks specific species. And so, like, if you want to play an exocomp, you can play an exocomp now. If you want to play...
I saw that. Crazy.
If you want to play a cetacean, you can play a cetacean now. So we were really excited that with the different species that we were able to get into that book. So probably one of those would be the most unique. Also, in our player's guide, we went through and started discussing like non-Starfleet character roles. So like if you want to be a diplomat, there's rules in there for that. If you want to be a cook, there's rules in there for that. Really interesting, there's a kid, like there's rules for playing a kid, kind of like a Wesley Crusher or a Jake.
Right.
So I think like if you were to take one of those interesting species from the new campaign guide for Lower Decks and mix it with like kid, I think you would have a really unique experience playing the game.
All right, now you've...
I saw that. Let me...
Yeah, we ran a campaign where it was an impromptu, no prep work, and everybody at the table showed up with child characters inexplicably unplanned. And now I desperately want to play a Star Trek Adventures campaign where everybody is the child of officers on the Enterprise.
Oh, that's awesome. I think in addition to Al's comments, I think I would add that for those listeners who are familiar with all the great work that IDW Comics is doing right now for Star Trek, a couple years ago they wrapped up their Star Trek Year 5 series, and we had an opportunity to do a supplement supporting the Year 5 line. And so, if you're familiar with that comic series, they introduced some new species, the Ikosa, which are an aquatic species, so we got them into the game. You can also play Tholians. The Tholians played a big role in that comic series, so we got the Tholians in as a playable species. And then if you really want to have a fun challenge on the websites and on DriveThruRPG, you can get a free downloadable Tribble character sheet, so you can play Tribbles if you want to. And the Tribbles, there's also optional rules in there for Tribble that's been assimilated by the Borg. So if you want to have a really interesting game experience at your table, play a Tribble or play an assimilated Tribble, and then see what kind of shenanigans you can get into from there.
Playing a Tribble makes my Klingon blood boil.
So I wanted to dive in actually because there's actually kind of an array of different things that are coming out that are Lower Decks, have Lower Decks content in them. And I kind of want to just go through them piece by piece, just talk about what the difference is between all these things. I think we've been talking so far about the campaign. Is it called a pack or a campaign supplement, or what's the official?
The Lower Decks campaign guide. That's the book that's on right now. That's a 200. Yeah, that's a 240-page hardcover, full color. Standard 8.5 by 11, standard RPG size. Splat book, I guess if you want to call it that. Campaign guide full of information about Lower Decks, the Lower Decks experience, how to play Lower Decks officers in the game. Just a ton of lore about Starfleet and the Lower Decks experience. How to play Lower Decks characters in other polities. So if you want to play Klingons or Pakleds or Romulans or Ferengi, even Borg in the Lower Decks kind of mode. A lot of advice on that. new species, like Al mentioned, tons of writing advice, like if you want to bring the Lower Decks style of humor into your game, some guidance and some thoughts around that. And then a three-part mini campaign, all focused around the Lower Decks character type of experience. So we packed as much as we could into 240 pages. It's pretty dense in terms of just cool tools to throw at game masters and players to add to your game, and hopefully folks will dig it.
Yeah, I have in my notes that I literally wrote that my main note for the campaign guide is "Holy shit, playable exocomps." So.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of cool, but like, why even bother with the rest of that chapter? I mean, who wouldn't play a Pac-Led, right? It should just be the Pac-Led chapter. I mean, come on.
Yeah, this book could almost double as the Pac-Led supplement because obviously because Pac-Leds play such a key role in Lower Decks to date, that we wanted to really make sure that we had a lot of material in there. So there's some great information and lore around Pac-Leds and their world, their ships. There's a bunch of different ship options in there for Pac-Leds, non-player character write-ups and stat blocks, and of course the information on how to actually play a Pac-Led in the game, as a playable character species. So for those of you like me who love the Pac-Leds in a weird kind of way, then there's tons of information in here for you to play with.
I love it. You also got a foreword from Mike McMahon in that book, which is pretty neat. Got from the man himself, the Lower Decks man himself. So that's pretty cool. Yeah,
very very grateful he had the time to put that together. Just the way the weird timing worked out when we delivered the manuscript for their review. It all goes to him and his team at Titmouse, and like the manuscript hit right when they were in the throes of post production on season 3. And so they were so busy. It took a long time for the manuscript to be reviewed and approved, only because we just hit it at the wrong time. We had no idea, obviously, when they were in post production, but that's what we found out. And that he found time to write a forward for us was just amazing. And to be honest with you, I didn't realize he had as much gaming experience as he did until I read that forward, and I was like, oh man, this guy's a big gamer just like the rest of us. So I was just really thrilled that he was able to contribute that.
I'm always amazed when you always hear stories like that of, oh yeah, it turns out that there's this whole big gaming culture in this group, right? My longtime friend was military for like 10 years, and he would talk about playing games when he was in the Army. RPG, specifically D&D, but then you'll hear stuff like, oh yeah, well it turns out that D&D is really big in prison populations, and it's really big amongst actors, and you're just like, I mean, like, some of that makes sense, right? But it's kind of for everybody, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing. The more we release stuff for this game, and the more we reach out and expand our touching out to different people, we discover who's playing games and who's not playing games. We found out Anthony Rapp on Discovery. He runs a D&D game for the cast, and we found out that Todd Stashwick is a huge gamer, and in fact he just recently ran D&D for Jerry Ryan and Jonathan Frakes.
Yeah, I saw that.
Wow, this is amazing! Like, guys, do you want to run Star Trek? I remember at one point we asked Anthony Rapp if he'd run Star Trek Adventures for like a charity thing or something, and he was like, yeah, you know what, I do Star Trek for reals. I'm not ready to do Star Trek RPG. And I was like, I get that. I understand.
Yeah. It's like bringing work home or something.
It's also one of those things that, to be fair, I've noticed a lot of the celebrity gaming stuff. It's always D&D 5th edition, and I love D&D 5th edition, but it is a very simple game, right? You can spool somebody up in a few minutes and hit the ground running, right? Even when people don't have introductions, there's a basic understanding there. But, that simplicity also kind of narrows the field that the game can be played in. That was one of the things I found really interesting about the Star Trek Adventures game, is it's much more narrative focused than D&D, and albeit 5th edition is a little more narrative focused and a little less crunchy than previous editions. But it is much, much harder to run a system where the rules are baked into the narrative, as opposed to just the narrative happens outside of the rules.
Yeah. Yeah, that's always like I've got tons of lifetime experience playing D&D and I enjoy it, but I think a lot of my 5th edition games, I don't know if it was the DM or the group or just the overall vibe, but it always, like every time I played 5th edition especially, it always felt like it was two different games. It was like there was one game where you're just doing the narrative and you're doing the RP and you're going through the adventure or whatever, and then like the moment an encounter comes up, it's like everybody's brain shifted into like tactical combat map mode where you're bringing out the miniatures and you're bringing out the map and you're bringing out all the stuff, and it's like, oh, now all of a sudden we're in a tactical tabletop combat game, and all the RP went away, like everything went away because all we were doing was focusing on the
it's tactical
right? Stuff. And I was like, this is weird, right? As I've gotten older, it's like, oh, this is weird. Why can't it be a blend of the two? And I think it's just that D&D that's baked into me from back in the day when we had Facos and bend bars, lift gates, and all that stuff. It's hard to get away from that sometimes.
I always kind of like related to like White Wolf games that were much more narrative focused, and I can't remember like whether it was 1st edition or 2nd, where so much of the game was just built around the dice just exist to tell you whether this action you take succeeds and how well you succeed about it. Which I think translating that to, Star Trek Adventures is a lot of like the momentum system, and it adds that extra layer of narrative focused with, complications and determination, and just it's interesting to see like this new paradigm. I just find it very interesting as a gameplay mechanic, and the fact that everything's integrated into a scene as a scene as a scene, even when it's combat.
Right.
I think one of the things that's unique about the system is that it assumes that you're all highly competent. And yes, even in a lower deck setting, these are still, competent individuals that have worked their way onto a starship, right? So it's a lot of tell me what you want to do, and I will tell you if it can happen or if you have to make a roll to see if it happens. So I found like approaching a game in that manner, you get the players a lot more narrative and descriptive about their actions and more detailed about what it is they're actually doing, instead of going to grab their dice and roll right away to see if they succeed, right? Like I've had players say, well, can I scale down the turbo lift shaft? And I'm like, I don't know. Can you? Do you want to do that? Like, if you would like to do that, I can tell you what it would take to be successful. And that's one of the things I love about this game is you're already 20th level characters when you start the game.
That really is pretty cool.
One of the other things I appreciate about the game that Nathan Dowdell is the lead developer at Modiphius for 2D20 games. And I just love the fact that, especially from a narrative focus, players have the ability by spending momentum or by giving the game master threat, these little meta currencies that we have in the game. The players can actually have some agency in terms of like actually shaping the scenes or the encounters to some extent, where they can add their own contributions. Like, a complication came up, or you want to create a particular advantage that helps your characters get through that scene. You can tactically choose when to spend this momentum or to give the game master some threat just to help shape the narrative a little bit. And from a storytelling perspective and from a collaborative gaming perspective, I think that gives players a great amount of joy in my experience. To like, it's not just the game master dictating to them what's happening, either just by fiat or just based on the die rolls, successes and failures. The players can actually kind of shape things along, and I think it's just so much more rewarding in my experience that players can do that. And feel comfortable, and as long as everyone's on the same page, kind of, you can just have some amazing gaming.
Star Trek Adventures, like of all the RPGs I've played or read, it is the only game that has a baked-in risk versus reward mechanic as a core of its system.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we're kind of touching a lot on everything that has to do with the campaign guide. But to kind of delve more into the background instead of the game itself, I really wanted to know what how hands-on was Paramount / CBS / Mike McMahon's team in collaborating with you guys to do this. Was it a kind of ask forgiveness instead of permission type situation, or were they approving assets step by step? I'm asking you because I've certainly worked at companies that really wanted to, look at every single asset and
oh my god,
this
that
guy
is
is not the
exactly
right
what I
shade
was
of
thinking. I was
blue
going to say,
and this and that.
tell me
So-
about your that's the wrong shade of blue moment. In the world that like every company has that's the wrong shade of blue.
Yeah, so Paramount, we have a great working relationship with Paramount. They approve literally everything we do at multiple stages. So they look at the look at the draft manuscripts, they review those, and either provide notes or approve them, just depending on what the content is and whether we miss the mark or hit the mark or whatever. They'll give us feedback as appropriate. They look at all the artwork, so all the artwork, all the manuscripts, the covers, the layouts, everything. They look at everything multiple times. Either 2 or 3 times, depending on how far along we are. And the review team over there is amazing and fantastic. And if you're looking for is this character the right shade of blue moment, the one example I can think of is we were developing the Klingon core rulebook, and there's a piece of art in there of some Klingon, original series era Klingon soldiers doing whatever they're doing, and in the background was a Klingon soldier. And they had the traditional original series uniform. It was like the black pants with the gold vest with the turtleneck underneath it, and he had a belt buckle just like all the other ones did. But the button placement on the belt buckle was wrong. And the note we got from Paramount was, is that belt buckle button arrangement canonical, or did you where's the reference that you found to do that? We just want to check and make sure we got our references right. And I looked at it and I was like, oh man, I think we got it wrong. And so we went back and found our archival material, and we went back to the artist and said, hey, we got the belt buckle wrong, can you fix it? So They check every word, they check every manuscript, they check every piece of art very carefully, because they know their Star Trek, certainly better than we do. And I think, myself and my team, we know Star Trek pretty darn well.
I guarantee you that artist was in the inside screaming, I was hoping they wouldn't notice.
No, I don't know about that, but I was screaming inside thinking, why didn't I catch that? Right? But no, I don't think we've ever really intentionally tried to get anything past them. I think there are certainly tons of Easter eggs in all of our books that frankly, even I probably miss some of them, because some of my writers are pretty clever, and they'll put Easter eggs in there that even I don't catch sometimes. And Paramount often doesn't give us notes on that stuff, so we're like, okay, they didn't have a note on it, we're off and running, all good. But yeah, I don't remember getting any notes about somebody being the wrong shade of blue or a shade of color or something. But especially for Lower Decks, though, interestingly, we had permission from the Lower Decks teams to use screenshots from the show liberally as needed, which was great, because that was a huge, A, it's a time saver, but B, it's also saved us a lot of money. But we also wanted to include a lot of original art in the book, because we try to put original art in all of our products. We don't normally use screen captures or screenshots or production stills, like other RPG companies that have done Star Trek relied on that, because obviously that stuff is free, right? As long as Paramount has it,
money, sure.
As long as Paramount has it in the archive, you can use that stuff all day long. But we really wanted to do more original art for this game line, and for Lower Decks, we made the conscious decision early on to make it all Lower Decks style art in this particular book, because it was an opportunity to do something a little different for the line. And what my art director did, Ariel O'Reilly, he's a great art director. He was able to source a whole bunch of artists who could do the Lower Decks style of art and characters, and made that work. But in a couple of cases, some of the characters, the proportions were a little different. The proportions of faces and legs and stuff were just a little different. And to my eye, my layman's artistic eye, I didn't really see it. But we sent it to Paramount, and they sent it to Mike McMahon and his team. And obviously, they live and breathe Lower Decks all day long, and so they were very particular about how they wanted these characters to be portrayed in the artwork, which I 100% absolutely get. So they had some fairly extensive art notes on some of the original art and the cover. You'll see that the main characters are on the cover, and that just meant we had to make some adjustments, and that was totally fine. It was just an interesting experience to actually get art notes back, because like traditionally most of our artwork is original, and it's usually new characters or new species or something. and Paramount was like, yeah, that looks great, fine, no worries. But in this case, because we were trying to hew as close as possible to that Lower Decks style, they had a few notes for us just to try to make sure that we were fitting right in with their vision for their characters.
And in some cases, they were telling us we needed to be a little bit funnier, right?
Oh yeah, for the manuscripts, absolutely. So I Lower Decks has a very particular style and tone of humor, right? And it's alternately, irreverent and funny and dramatic and honest. And then, like, if you think of like Badgie, right? Badgie's all over the place, where he's sometimes helpful and then sometimes outright, just an evil. And we have a lot of sidebars in the book that are from Badgie's perspective, providing color on the text that's being discussed. And in some places, Badgie wasn't funny enough or wasn't Badgie enough, and in some places he was just being too malicious. And I was like, well, but it's Badgie. And they were like, well, Badgie's kind of a fine line between funny and menacing. And so there was a few places where we had to kind of like, turn the dial a little bit to try to like zero right in on what the right tone was. Even for some of the other parts of the manuscript where we had like Boimler introduces the book and introduces some of the other sections, we had to just fiddle with the language just a little bit to get that right, that right Boimler tone and that right overall Lower Decks tone. Overall, it was super positive and super productive. It just added a little bit more time to the review cycle, right? Because we had to make some strategic rewrites to some places.
It's funny you say that, because one of my notes here was to inquire about how much of a focus was adding zaniness to the Star Trek Adventures game. Was
it's got to be different than doing any other Trek show, right? Like you've got to emulate the Lower Decks tone specifically, which is not a thing that appears in the franchise otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. Like most of our books are played, are presented fairly straight, so that they fit right into the setting, into the franchise and stuff, and that we provide players and game masters a really strong canonical grounding in everything Star Trek. So like if you want to play something Star Trek, you can use our books as a reference and then build on from there. We do embellish around the corners a little bit, and we add in a lot of secondary canon where it makes sense. Like we've made references to the comic books and the novels and the video games where it fits, and strategically we can drop those Easter eggs in. But for Lower Decks, because Lower Decks as a series is such a unique departure from every other Star Trek series out there, we thought there was an opportunity with this book to make this a little bit of a departure from the standard Star Trek Adventures product line and do something fun and do something different and just get a little silly with it, but still be reverential to Star Trek, because that's totally what Lower Decks is, and not make fun of it, but just be silly within the bounds of Star Trek, right? In fact, that's why we made the cover self-referential, right? Because if you look at the cover, it's the same background basically as our core rule book, and we just changed up the characters. So instead of the 3 characters that were on there the first time around, we added Boimler and Mariner and Tendi and Rutherford, but it's the same circumstances, right? They're still exploring the same kind of setting that the original characters on the core rule book were, which we thought would be just like a fun nod to ourselves, but also because Lower Decks kind of does a nod to Star Trek as it is, right? So we had fun with we had fun with that. And I told my writers, look, we can be funnier in this book than we normally are, but at the same time be careful, because humor is so subjective. What you think is slap knee funny is going to be completely flat to somebody else, and they're going to be like, "What? I don't get it." So we had to be careful with that. And again, that's why we got some notes from Paramount saying, "Hey, this needs to be funnier. This doesn't make sense," or whatever. So it was but yeah, ultimately we had a lot of fun doing something a little bit different with this book.
Yeah, I think we all had the perspective when we were writing it, that if there was somebody who didn't enjoy the Lower Decks TV show, they could still pick this up and get a lot out of it for their campaign, right? Because there are Lower Decks on every single ship in Star Trek, right?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be a wisecracking or comedic Lower Decks, right? So, our writers were going through, and we joke around saying that we've got chapters in here that are basically like HR for Starfleet. But like, seriously, like, what type of jobs would a lower decker have on like an aircraft carrier these days? And we kind of extrapolated that over to what that would look like in the future. And so we really wanted to make this accessible for all Star Trek Adventures players. Of course, there's stuff in there for the people that love Lower Decks, the television show, as well. We reference a bunch of stuff in there, especially in the sidebars. There's some really fun stuff in there. But I think that anyone who enjoys Star Trek could pick this up and find plenty of stuff that they can work into their campaign overall, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say if you think of the Next Generation episode Lower Decks, and then like the DS9 episodes, Soldiers of the Empire, and Valiant, right? All three of those episodes really focus on Lower Decks characters in a much more serious tone than Lower Decks does. And so if you're not a fan of Lower Decks, like Al said, but you still want to have a campaign or even like a one-shot or something that's just focused on junior officers, kind of in the spirit of Valiant or Soldiers of the Empire, or again, Lower Decks. Or even there were some Voyager episodes, too, that had Lower Deckers. There was that one episode where Tuvok was training.
Tuvok is training
that's right.
the malcontents of Voyager.
Yeah, so obviously we have great canon examples of this, and you can absolutely do that in the game without even bringing in the Lower Decks, style of humor if you don't want to. There's still a wealth of material in the book that you can find use at your game table.
Yeah, and I was kind of wondering about that because I know there was a lot of disappointment when Lower Decks was announced that it was going to be a animated, humorous TV series, and a lot of people wanted a very serious TNG-styled Lower Decks series.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask Al specifically. I mean, what was your favorite part on doing the campaign guide specifically? What was your baby as far as the campaign guide goes?
Honestly, like my favorite part, I got to do a few different sections in here. I got to write a mission. I got to do a bunch of the NPCs and enemies, and I got to do 7 of the 8 species life paths. And I think the Temerian life path, or like species, was probably my favorite, just because I think Temerians are just such an interesting species, and being able to put in there, like, what is it that their culture is like things that we didn't see on the screen during Darmok. And it was just, it did so much research and really kind of extrapolated out and kind of massaged like what I thought the species culture was like, in that basically I said, if you are a member of the Temerian species, your history and your mythology are one and the same, and how all members of the species could potentially become part of that mythology by doing great deeds and whatnot through their unique language. And got to do a little like conversion table in there as to what their metaphors roughly translate to in English. And yeah, that was probably my most fun moment, followed up closely behind by writing the Mugado stats for the game. Because I did, I think, 6 different spellings of Mugado, because that is
just like randomly, or did you call it out in the?
Oh no, that was on purpose, because that is something that is in Star Trek lore. That it was mispronounced. Is that right, Jim?
That's right. I think so.
Yeah, I can't remember if the episode itself actually had multiple references in it within the episode that it was spelled differently, but I think you got like 8 or 9 different spellings of it in there, and they green checked it all, so we were good to go. Good. I'm glad they let it stay in.
Yeah, the original episode they pronounced it 2 different ways, and then in Lower Decks they called that out and said, "Oh yeah, it turns out that they're both equally valid."
I love it. Well, that's really cool. We've kind of been all over the place as far as the campaign guide goes. Is there anything else really neat or interesting about that product specifically that we've missed talking about?
One thing I would add is that, in general, we've avoided using a lot of random tables in our books, like to create stuff. Although in the last couple of years, we've started adding more strategically, just based on what made sense for the product and what made sense for what we were trying to get across to players and game masters. And in the Lower Decks book, we had an opportunity, especially Al. I know Al created a bunch of them, to just like add interesting color to different situations and create a random table. Because, like, honestly, if you watch the show, right, sometimes the things that happen to the characters are really, truly just totally random stuff, especially in like the teasers right before they go into the opening music and credits. like this is some random stuff that happens, right? And we wanted to kind of like add that kind of random feel, because we're like, if you're a Lower Decks officer, like sometimes stuff happens to you that you're not expecting, and you're just kind of along for the ride. And we wanted to kind of bring that feel into it. So we've created a whole bunch of different random tables of stuff like, you know, your senior officer died in one episode, but then came back and didn't explain why they came back. Well, here's a random D20 table of why they came back. Like, what happened to them that brought them back? Were they de-assimilated from the
Black Mountain on there? The Shack's solution?
I think we got Black Mountain in there somewhere, or at least a reference to that and to the koala at the edge of space.
Oh yes, of course.
So we got, you know, like you know, why did your senior officer come back? We have a big table about the farm, like if you remember the Division 14.
Oh yeah.
You know, what horrible affliction have you been hit with? What was the cause of it, and then what's the potential cure? Right. So we got some, you know, fun, goofy stuff in there. Al, help me out. What are some of the other random tables we got in there?
There's the hey, you grab this and get to doing that on the thing. Like if you need like something for someone's supervisor to say to them, it's hilarious. It's like a 3-tier table, and you say, hey, grab that spanner and get to work on recharging the plasma manifold. And it's just random jargon that you can roll up. That one's a lot of fun. I'm trying to think. Mandatory bonding time. There's a random table for that, I believe.
Nice. It reminds me of those like Star Trek technobabble tables you could find online.
Exactly.
Or just,
exactly.
Just roll the dice.
Yeah. These are similar to that in some respects, but also ways to kind of spark imagination and give the characters, you know, something to do. Whether it's a random table for like opening an episode, right? Like opening up before the teaser, or, you know, opening up as a cold open or something. You know, like what are the characters doing like right when you start the episode? And that could be a really good way to get the characters and the players into the game. Like, okay, you know, we're getting ready to start playing the game, and hey, all of your characters are, you know, doing an EVA outside the ship, and the ship, you know, drops you off at the asteroid and then leaves. What do you do? You're just like there on the asteroid. It's like, okay, but yeah, like Al said, the mandatory bonding time table was inspired by that episode where Mariner and Tendi go off on a quote unquote girls trip. And we thought, well, why don't we expand that into like 20 options of like random things that the Lower Decks player characters could do to bond and to get together and to do something as a group. And we got just a lot of fun options in here. So hopefully this will, you know, give players an opportunity to do something fun and different at their, you know, Star Trek Adventures game that isn't the tried and true stuff that you're used to. Again, this is a 240-page book, so there's a ton of content in here. Every page, hopefully, dripping with plot hooks and ideas to spark the imagination. Don't think that this is just a book about the series, right? There's just a lot of other content that we were able to drop in here to really provide the breadth of the Lower Decks experience into any Star Trek game, no matter whether you're playing Starfleet or you know, something else.
And I would like to add, Jim, something that we haven't mentioned is we also have 2 crew packs. We have a mission up, a digital mission, and then we have a pack of mission briefs up as well, correct?
Absolutely. Yep.
All digital products.
I was going to mention those as well. I mean, you kind of breeze through all of them, but I mean...
Yeah, you guys are killing Stavros here. He had a whole section planned out. Where he's all like, hey, you've got this, and you've got this. Tell us a little bit about it. But...
No plan survives contact with the guests, so it's fine. But yeah, I mean, if you guys could just give us the rundown on each one of these, like what does that bring to the table as far as Lower Deck stuff?
Yeah, sure thing. So we've made a conscious decision in the vast majority of our books that we don't include stats for the canonical characters, right? So you're not going to find stats for Kirk or Picard or Worf for the most part in our books, except in strategic places. So if you're grabbing the Lower Decks campaign guide and you're expecting to see Rutherford and Tendi, etc., they're not in the book, and that was intentional because we really want players and game masters to focus on their characters and their experiences and their stories. So what we do is we provide the canonical characters in short digital releases, on PDF, on DriveThruRPG, and on the web stores. So if you want the stats of Rutherford and Tendi and Shax and so on and so forth, like you can grab the digital pack for like $4, $5 or something like that, and they'll give you the stats. And that way, if you want to compare your character against them, you can certainly do so. They're all statted up legally, just along the lines of any other character. I remember back in the day, like I always hated when an RPG like a licensed RPG would stat out the main characters, and like they didn't actually use the rule set to stat them up. They were just like beyond capable
right.
of a starting player character could be like. And that always frustrated me because I was like, well, wait a minute. If I'm playing a character, I want to see how I rate to, Luke Skywalker or Kirk or whatever. And if I can't do that in your game system, then why would I bother, right? That's just frustrating. But so all the player characters that we present in the crew packs are built just like any other player character. So like you should be able to make a 1-to-1 comparison between your character and Mariner or Rutherford or whatever. So yeah, we got 2 crew packs. One's for season 1, one's for season 2. Because the characters, improved incrementally between the seasons, and we rotated in and out some different non-player characters so that you can play with those as well. There is a standalone adventure titled Lurkers that is written by Christopher L. Bennett, and those that are following the Star Trek fiction scene, he's written a lot of very well-received Star Trek novels, and he's also written a bunch of other science fiction. He's been in Analog and Asimov's, etc. He's got some other novels out there. He's just full-time writer, and he's a friend of mine, and he was gracious enough to play in the Star Trek Adventures universe, so he wrote a standalone adventure. I'm not going to spoil it, but if you're familiar with the Star Trek convention scene, this will be a very fun episode for you to run at your table. Mm-hmm. And then also, you mentioned the free content that we offer earlier in the show, and so every other month we try to release a free pack of 10 mission briefs. And 10 mission briefs are basically high-level outlines for a story. Basically, you can take that to your game table one night and just run an episode of Star Trek using that as a high-level outline, and then letting your players, help you kind of like fill in the details as things happen and the players make choices, and maybe it goes completely off the rails and goes somewhere different, or maybe you just use it as inspiration to tell an even better story. So anyway, we have there's 10 episodes in that free mission pack. So if you were to grab the Lower Decks book, which itself has 12 mission briefs in it, plus the 3 mini campaign adventures, if you were to grab the Lower Decks book and that free mission brief pack, that would give you 25 episodes potentially. And depending on how often your group plays, that's like a year plus of real year plus of content that you can enjoy.
Yeah.
For not a lot. And we do a lot of those mission briefs. I think Al, I've lost track. I think we've got probably 350 discrete episodes out there now for Star Trek Adventures, either in mission brief format or actual standalone, adventure format. So, game masters and players new to the game, there is just a wealth of material available for you right now to play this game for the rest of your life if you want to.
Jesus, did you see the TV series and think, we got to beat that? We can beat that.
26 episode seasons, baby.
Yeah.
It's the old days. It's the glory days, the 90s. That's crazy. I didn't realize it was being continually updated with new ideas. That's pretty sweet. What did you say was weekly?
No. Every other month we do a free mission brief.
Every other month.
And then every month that we don't do a mission brief pack, we have a standalone adventure coming out. So I try to do 6 standalones and 6 mission brief packs every year. And that machine has just been running smoothly for a couple of years now.
That is pretty crazy.
Yeah, as a GM, forever GM that loves GMing, the mission briefs are like the greatest thing that I've experienced in role-playing games. 1-page scenarios that give you that high overview, and you can take them, you can tweak them. I like to use them as B plots. Might do A plots with part of the group, and then do a B plot with the mission briefs. But the mission briefs really can be expanded to a full episode each. And I think we've got over a dozen packs of those out there right now that you can download for absolutely free. So that's pretty awesome.
Okay, well, so with all this adventure content out there, with all these episodes, I gotta know, they weren't all bangers in Star Trek. What is Star Trek Adventures Sub Rosa? Come on, tell me.
Is there one in there?
I'm just saying, because if I'm going to run a campaign,
is there a sex ghost in there somewhere?
One where there's a sex candle. Just tell me.
Oh, no. I'm scared of this answer.
I have to be honest. I'm going to have to punt on this one because I'm helping for the writers write it and I edit it and then send it off to Paramount. They approve it, and I haven't run every single thing that we've written, and I think there's only like 1 or 2 people that I know of in the fandom who has noted that they've run everything that we've done. Like I can't believe that someone has run all 300 odd episodes or mission briefs, but someone out there's done it. And I honestly don't know because I'm on all the social media, I'm on all the RPG forums and stuff that talk about the game and whatnot. And a lot of it comes down to personal preference, obviously, right? Like some people like some adventures more than others. I don't think I've heard anybody say, "Oh, this episode," or this adventure sucks, or whatever. I think some like them better than others, and for every person that says, "Oh, I didn't like this one," there'll be somebody else that says, "Oh my gosh, I love that one, and it had the most amazing adventures with my group," or whatever. So I'm gonna have to punt on this answer because I don't know what our Sub Rosa is. So I'll have to let that one go. Hey, Al, any thoughts?
Not in particular, but like again, my preference is I prefer like a less railroady type mission. Like
Yeah.
I prefer having a little bit more control over what's happening within the mission. And I think that, there might be a more railroady mission here or there. But in the end, I always take those as challenges where I can focus on my character and how my character develops throughout the episode. So ultimately, that's really my driving force. So I can't say that I've ever played an adventure that I disliked, but I think that's because I engage at a high level with my characters.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like every writer that I hire to work on the line is super passionate about Star Trek. I'm super passionate about Star Trek, and we all have such a love for the franchise that I don't think we would intentionally write something that was like Spock's brain or a Sub Rosa or something like that. Of course, when they were developing those episodes, I'm sure they were not intending to make them be high quality or subpar. Like I don't think that was in their thought process. It's just like that's how it all turned out because of the nature of television. And when you're on like you said, 26 episodes a season, right? When you're on that kind of a machine with that much pressure to get stuff done as fast as humanly possible, so that you can get it out and hit that air date. Sometimes you're going to have standouts and sometimes you're going to have some stinkers, right? But I think the RPG might be a little different than that because like we do have a robust release schedule, but I generally don't push my writers to get it done by a certain point in time, especially with the standalones and the mission briefs, because those get done when they get done. And I've got so many in development that like if one person's adventure isn't ready to go right away, then I'm sure I've got 2 or 3 others that I can slot into it without missing a beat, right? So.
And when Jim looks at a like a proposal for a mission or something like that, like a pitch, I think he's really good about responding with, "Hey, does it just have to be this one possible solution, right? Is really a combat in the final scene like the only thing that can happen here?" And then encourages the writers to go back and think about that, like how can this be? Because not everyone is going to be a bring your phasers out and start firing first type players. So like think about it from all aspects of the game. And I think that Jim does a great job providing feedback when people give him pitches about stuff like that.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate that.
I do want to take a step back here to something, Al said previously about his preferred, gameplay style, his preferred adventure style being more sandbox than railroady. So it sounds to me like you're saying less an errand of mercy guy where Starfleet gives you a mission and you go and do the mission, and more of an amok time guy where Starfleet goes and gives you a mission and you decide to help get your best friend laid instead.
Oh no.
I think that
I feel like I put him back on his heels.
Again, I just always like to think of it from the perspective of a character, and what we're going to do with that character, and how we develop that character over a period of time. As a GM, I'm in the back of my head thinking of arcs that I want my characters to go through. So if my players say that they want to, go against what Starfleet's asking them to do, there'll be consequences for that in the future, and I'll make sure to write that in. And myself personally, I like to talk about personal growth as I move through a mission. So whether it's sandboxy or railroady, I try to look at who my character is, what their values are, and hey, do any of these values come into play? If so, here's what I'm going to do this mission. If not, maybe I'll take the back seat and let someone else, take the lead this mission. And I think that's what the brilliance is of this 2D20 system that Nathan developed.
Well, from a design perspective, it's so hard to create good sandboxes and still engage your players. But that concept is very core to Star Trek. The captain gets the mission to go to, planet Beta 9 and, provide relief supplies. And it turns out that, Beta 9's kind of a crap sack. And suddenly, resolving his mission is only going to make things worse here. So he has to get creative. That is a core Star Trek episode idea.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the missions that are pre-written, and certainly the mission briefs, are loose about their endings. Like, so this may be how you approach it, or maybe you do this, or maybe you do something completely different. In the end, here's the shape of things after the mission is over, right? So to allow players to have the flexibility to approach the story from how their group likes to do it,
Yeah, and I'll add that we've somehow managed. I think a lot of our mission briefs and a lot of our standalone adventures are intentionally written with like a notional ending, but provide a lot of flexibility for players and game masters to go in a different direction. But we do try to really inject the traditional Star Trek moral dilemma in there as well, right? Where it's like there are not always easy answers or easy resolutions to things, right? Like sometimes your choices are bad and worse, right? And the players have to figure out, like, okay, what do we do here? Like either situation, either way we go, or maybe there's a third way or something. The end result is like not great. So like, how do you deal with that? Because that's life, right? Like sometimes there is no happy ending, and you just got, like, I think DS9 especially did a great job of some of those episodes.
I feel like one of the series had a great quote about this very topic from one of the captains. Something about not making any wrong decisions and still failing. Who was that?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's gotta be Picard.
Yeah, Picard knew what he was.
There you go. We won. We got it.
Congratulations, guys. Job's done here. Let's go home.
That's awesome.
Of course, having said all that about, the core of Star Trek and, moral implications and solving problems, how many of these episodes are courtroom dramas?
I think we've got a couple in there, especially with some mission briefs. I think there's a couple of courtroom dramas. I think, Star Trek historically has done it so well so many times, not to mention the most recent episode of Strange New Worlds. No spoilers
Don't
here.
Spoil
but,
it for Stavros. He's only an armchair Star Trek fan. He hasn't watched yet.
Okay.
Wow. I see.
I think we've done a couple of courtroom drama, optional or potential. Like we don't force that necessarily on the players. But circumstances happen. I think I've certainly seen plenty of YouTube streamers and Twitch streamers and people who've recorded their sessions that things went sideways in one of their sessions, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, it's time for a court martial, and then they have to role play through that next. Cause like that's one of the nice things about Star Trek, depending on how you're running it, is that your actions have consequences, and you're not just off to the next dungeon the next week, or you're not off to the next planet the next week. Like sometimes if your characters do something heinous, or just totally bumble their way through a situation, then Starfleet Judge Advocate General and Starfleet Command is going to come in and say, hey, what happened on planet Zeta 3 there? Let's talk about it, and have a general inquiry or a court martial and get into it. And in general, players might, or the characters might come through that unscathed, or maybe they'll get the proverbial slap on the wrist or something. But that's part and parcel of Star Trek. I think we've seen it plenty of times, and it's not something to be scared of necessarily. It's just potential for character growth and character drama, and that's what we're here for.
Yeah, and if you were to run a session like that, my recommendation would be to try to have a B plot going as well, to try to keep all players engaged. Oftentimes when you're doing a court drama, it's one character at a time in the scene, and that can sometimes lead other players to kind of disconnect a little bit. So to help everybody stay engaged, I would always recommend a B plot for something like that, especially.
Solid advice.
Or if you do something fun like what they did with Measure of a Man, right? They had Picard defending Data, and they made Riker be the opposing counsel, right? So immediately you've got player versus player in a certain format, but it really changes the dynamic and makes the players think. And and puts them in unpleasant situations, right? Because like Riker certainly didn't want to be there, prosecuting Data, but he did a good job of it because he had to, right? That was the job he was placed into. So that would be an interesting situation to put some players into, I think. Yeah, I think you'd probably want to talk to the group ahead of time and say, is this cool? Is it okay to do this kind of thing? Or maybe like a session 0 where, maybe some players just don't want to go there and maybe just, switch gears or something.
I think you found your next mission brief is something like this.
Believe it or not, we actually, a little spoiler for everybody, we actually do have a Judge Advocate General mission brief in the works.
Oh.
That'll talk about boards of inquiry and court martials and that kind of stuff. So yeah, look for that in the coming months.
That's awesome. Can't wait for that. We've talked a lot about all the different Lower Decks products coming out. Is there anything we missed or anything you guys want to call out?
Yeah, I think we've covered it pretty much. I think the crew packs, the standalone adventure, the mission brief pack, and then of course the big one being the Lower Decks campaign guide. Again, that's not to plug it necessarily, but available for pre-order right now on the two Modiphius sites, Modiphius.us, Modiphius.net. Available for pre-order. If you pre-order it, you get the PDF right away, and it's the full version of the PDF. It's not like a sample copy or a truncated version just to tease you. It's the full-blown book in PDF format with bookmarks and all that stuff. And the book itself, it's in UK now. It's on the way to the United States warehouse. We're expecting it to be at Gen Con in physical format, so go to the Gen Con booth, grab yourself a copy. But if you pre-ordered it from your local game store or wherever, those will be shipping in August, barring any surprise in the global supply chain or whatever. So it'll be out here pretty soon. And that's the extent of our plans for the most part, although we are working on a Season 3 supplement as well, because most of this book was developed and finalized before Season 3 finished. So there were some elements of Season 3 that we weren't able to include just because of the production schedule and the way things worked out. But because we know Season 4 is coming, we're working on a Season 3 digital supplement now. That'll be out when it gets done. I'm not even sure how long it'll take to go through the review process with the team, because hopefully we'll get them at a different time now, because they'll be done with post-production on Season 4, because that's coming out this year, and we'll probably get them in between Season 4 and Season 5, so hopefully that'll be a smooth process.
Well, let's I have a little special something planned before we break
this
here.
Is a bad idea. We shouldn't be doing that.
It's going to be really fun. We're going to come up together. It's going to be a team game where we're going to come up with a collaborative mission together. And I hope you guys have played Mad Libs before and you know the rules. But if not, I'm going to provide a list of things that I need words for. And it's between you three to figure out a word for each prompt. And then I will then slot in the word in a pre-built mission, and we're going to go from there and see what kind of mission we can come up with together. So how you guys decide which suggestion to use between the three of you is completely up to you guys. Without further ado, I think we're going to get started here. So the first prompt, it is a plural of Star Trek objects. It's got to be some kind of Star Trek objects. It's plural.
I don't know, coil spanners?
Coil spanners. Any better ideas? It's kind of.
I like coil spanners. That's good.
Oh, coil spanners. Okay.
I would have said self-sealing stem bolts.
I was thinking stem bolts when I first wrote this, but you know what? We're going to have to go with coil spanners. All right. The next, we need a ship name. The Starfleet ship name.
Alhambra.
Alhambra. All right.
I was thinking something more like Titanic, something unsinkable. Or the Earhart.
Too topical.
Oof.
No,
yeah.
None of those?
Yeah. I don't think we're going with that. It's a little too topical. All right. I need an adjective. An adjective. Any adjective will do.
Stinky?
Sticky.
Okay.
Stinky. All right. Stinky or sticky?
Either one.
Okay, I heard stinky.
Sticky.
So Can
we not do both?
No, it has to be one or the other, unfortunately.
Stickily stinky. That's an adjective.
Is that just one word? That doesn't work at all. We're going with stinky.
Stinky works.
All right, I need a Star Trek alien.
I don't know. Oh, gosh.
Mugatu.
No, I think we should
Mugatu.
go with Gumatu.
Mugatu.
I feel like that's a better alien.
Gumatu. All right. I need a Star Trek planet.
Study Alpha 7.
Ooh. Doesn't that planet not exist?
No,
That's not a real planet.
Why not? I don't know that. Did they ever discuss how many planets were in the SETI Alpha system?
At least 6.
That's right. Okay, SETI Alpha 6 it is.
Oh, man.
I need a color.
Is clear a color?
Taupe.
Hope.
Taupe?
Hope. Like we got a color.
Taupe. Okay, taupe it is. I've never heard of that one, but you know what? As someone who develops products, I'm going to take your word for it.
Tan.
I need a number.
47?
47. Yeah.
47. That is the Star Trek number. We're gonna have to go with that. Okay, I need a word that's another plural object. So it doesn't have to be Star Trek. It could be anything.
Objects.
Any kind of
And
plural
we're getting
objects.
all the very specific Star Trek reference, and we're failing on objects.
Dustpans.
Dustpans. I like
Dustpans. I love it. Dustpans. Okay, I need a TNG era Star Trek character.
There's a lot of them, man. That's a loaded question.
Sonia Gomez.
Gomez, yeah.
Oh my
Gomez. Captain Gomez.
Well, is she a captain in TNG? No, she's not. Oh, it's not
Oh,
right.
she's
Well,
in it.
TNG era. Lower Decks is sort of TNG era.
Yeah, I think you're stretching it there, buddy.
I'm captaining this boat. She's a captain. I need a verb. Some verb. A lot of these are going to be general.
Engage.
Engage. Like
Engaging.
fight. Okay.
Engage, yeah.
An adjective.
Adjective.
Pungent.
Pungent.
Any adjective?
Pungent.
Pungent.
We're going with the whole smell angle here.
You have no idea. Wait till we get to the actual read through. I need a noun.
Noun. Water.
Okay. I need another adjective, and followed by another noun.
This is getting
Adjective
awfully
first.
repetitive.
Yes, you'll see.
Hey, repetitive.
Yeah, you'll
That's
see.
an adjective.
Repetitive. All right, another noun.
Oh my gosh. All I can think of.
Deflector dish.
Deflector dish. All right, I need a location on a starship.
Oh, the duck room. Rubber duck room.
Sick bay.
The duck room. I love it. Another adjective, followed by another noun.
What is going on here?
We're playing
Vicious.
a Mad Lib style game. Vicious. All right, another noun.
Phaser.
Phaser. Another ship location.
Turbolift control.
Is
Okay.
turbolift control an actual location?
It's the next gen reference.
We're going to make it. I love it. And last but not least, a verb.
Bossing? Boss?
What is it?
Boss.
Us?
Boss?
Is that a
Yeah,
word?
like us in throw, only less forceful.
Like os instead of toss? Or are you just saying toss? and
I
then
think I'm
microphone-
just saying
microphone's
toss,
being crazy?
and something's going wrong with my microphone, or
Okay, I see.
my vocal cords, because not like I've been drinking
be
or
either one.
anything.
All right. All right, here we go. We've completed our episode. Our episode is called The Trouble with Coil Spanners. On board the California-class ship, the USS Alhambra, topical, the player crew is tasked with transporting a shipment of stinky coil spanners to Gumatu on SETI
What
Alpha
are these
5.
Gamato doing with coil spanners? This whole thing is going
I
off
don't
the
know.
rails, man.
It's already off the rails. Who knows why they need it? Yeah. While
Lower
assisting
Decks.
with loading, they are approached by a Starfleet intelligence operative who invokes security protocol TOPE 47 and requires the players to deliver the cargo on time, no matter the cost. That means no superior officer involvement. The players are assigned to secure the cargo, but realize that it has been mixed up with a set of crates of dust pans that are actually due to be delivered to Captain Gomez, but was included on the shipment due to a clerical error. The characters must locate and separate out the correct cargo. As they sort it out, they realize that something strange is making the cargo containers engage every few minutes.
Cargo container engage? Like, are these electric cargo containers? Self-sealing cargo containers?
I didn't say this was going to be a perfect mission. As the crew investigates... Yeah, that's right. As they discover a peculiar alien life form that is stowed away in the cargo containers, given away by the pungent odor of pungent deflector dishes.
Very on brand.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's pungent water. I'm sorry. The pungent odor of pungent water.
Pungent water sounds
the
like
alien
a horrible,
quickly
it sounds. I don't even know. It's like a horrible diet drink. Pungent water.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. The alien quickly escapes to other parts of the ship, altering its scent as it goes. Repetitive deflector dish in the duck room.
Smell like?
and a vicious phaser in turbolift control. The crew desperately needs to explain away to any senior officers in those locations what they are doing before the alien can finally be captured and returned to the cargo bay. As the mission comes to a close, the crew finally manages to successfully deliver the cargo to City Alpha 5, but not before a final scene where the Alhambra's XO comes to oversee the transfer, just as the cargo is starting to engage once again. The end.
That sounds like a good Lower Decks right there.
I know. I'm waiting for my job offer to be a writer right now.
I've got good news. Writing is always an available job as long as you don't expect to get paid.
That is true.
Yeah, we often say just write, get your stuff out there, and then one day somebody
or
will
you'll
grab
go
you.
to jail. Pro tip: no matter how much you believe that just writing things down is not a crime, you are wrong.
Pro tips from Aaron, everyone.
There's a reason I live alone in a hovel in the desert.
Yeah. I think we've had enough of my inane mission construction.
Yeah,
so,
Aaron,
I think
honestly,
you need to get us out of here.
You've once again ruined things with your incessant rule lawyering. So I'm taking my drink and I'm going home. And until next time, you can follow us at Lower Dorks on Twitter. Or, if you're so inclined, you can roll up your own podcasters with Pen and Paper Podcasters, coming soon to a rundown strip mall with one struggling Gabe shop in the far corner, because they don't carry any mainstream content.
It's dark.